the dangers these powerful abortion drugs pose to women. In addition to killing an unborn child by starving the baby to death, an outrage in and of itself, the chemical abortion regimen presents significant health risks to pregnant women. That is at the core of the lawsuit. President Bill Clinton not only issued an executive order on his first day in office to bring these baby poisons to the United States, he sent his FDA commissioner, David Kessler, to lobby Roussel Uclaf, who was then the company marketing it, and he wanted them to market it here in the United States. In 2000, the FDA stated that abortion pills be taken no later than 7 weeks and have at least 3 in-person doctor visits to check for ectopic pregnancy, severe bleeding, and life-threatening complications. By 2016, however, the Obama FDA pushed usage to a 10-week pregnancy, only 1 doctor visit. It permitted non-physicians to prescribe the drugs and nullified the requirement that prescribers report all serious complications. We all know that when adverse events happen, the FDA needs to hear about it. There is underreporting in almost all drugs, but then they said you don't even have to report. So when people say how safe it is, they have no idea, although many of our doctors do. In 2021, Biden's FDA eviscerated the requirement for an office visit so that women now take these dangerous poisons at home without any determination whether or not there is an ectopic pregnancy. In the congressional amicus brief authored by Americans United for Life, and they will speak shortly, that my colleagues Congressman Pfluger and Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith, who will speak momentarily, led in support of this initiative, had 145 members of Congress in that petition. I encourage you to read that, and as well as the submissions that have been made and the arguments that have been made, but that were made by the Alliance Defending Freedom. Have a nice day. Please step aside. No, you come to every hearing and you have the right to speak, but now you're being very rude. I'd like to now introduce Cindy Hyde-Smith, who every hearing we have, they show up and they're entitled to their freedom of speech. But let me just say, I'd like to invite Cindy Hyde-Smith, a very, very distinguished member of the Senate, who has led this effort on the Senate side and was the co-lead on the amicus brief. Cindy.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for being here today on this really important issue. And as you can tell, it is very important, near and dear to us. This is our cause. This is why we are here today. We must hold FDA accountable for endangering the lives of women and girls across the United States. They have allowed abortion-inducing drugs to be readily available by completely circumventing federal law. Not only once, but twice. They have circumvented federal law to do this. The FDA's actions promotes dangerous do-it-yourself abortions by mail and telemedicine without even ever seeing a doctor. Ultimately, they have turned brick-and-mortar pharmacies and post offices into abortion clinics. The FDA has completely abandoned its obligation to protect the public and vulnerable population from harm and to comply with federal law. Folks, this is simple. They are breaking the law in doing this. They're endangering lives by doing this. This just is not right. And women deserve better than this. Women should be outraged that these people are put in danger like this, that other women are put in danger. I'm praying for the justices as they hear the oral arguments next week for all women and unborn children who have suffered from these drugs. I'm praying that the right decision will be made. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator. I'd like to now invite Eric Baptist, who serves as senior counsel at the Alliance Defending Freedom, focusing on a number of issues, but he is the lead litigant on this and has, if you take the time, and I do hope you do, to read what he and his team have put together, it is a very, very powerful argument as to why the FDA has absolutely abandoned women. Eric?
Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman. Good afternoon. I'm Eric Baptist, Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, and I serve as co-counsel on the case FDA versus Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the federal agency responsible for ensuring the safety of drugs that Americans take, has betrayed women and girls. Women should have the ongoing care of a doctor when taking high-risk drugs. But in recent years, the FDA has recklessly removed nearly every safeguard the agency previously considered necessary for abortion drugs, including in-person doctor visits to check for ectopic pregnancies, severe bleeding, and life-threatening infections. Without question, the FDA's actions made taking high-risk abortion drugs less safe for women. What's especially appalling is the FDA's rationale for removing the initial in-person office visit, thereby allowing abortion providers to mail these drugs without ever having to check women for life-threatening conditions or complications. The initial in-office visit was crucial because it provided a woman with her only opportunity to be checked for an ectopic pregnancy and to determine the gestational age of her baby before taking these drugs. The FDA took that away from women based on studies that the agency conceded were not adequate to show the safety of this new mail-order abortion scheme. On behalf of doctors, medical associations, and their members, Alliance Defending Freedom sued the FDA to hold it accountable for violating federal law and endangering the health and safety of women. Our doctor clients are witnessing firsthand the harms inflicted by the FDA's reckless actions. To understand the high-risk nature of these drugs, one need look no further than the FDA's own label for these drugs, which shows that roughly 1 in 25 women will end up in the emergency room after taking these drugs. This fact also reveals the absurdity of the FDA's claim that these drugs are just as safe as Advil. Advil doesn't send 1 in 25 women to the emergency room. And yet, those who profit from the sale of abortion drugs continue to peddle this false, dangerous narrative, ignoring how this lie harms women. The FDA must be held accountable for violating its duty to protect women's health. That is why ADF is asking the Supreme Court to find that the FDA acted unlawfully by removing its original safety standards, affirming what 3 federal courts have already held. As a devoted father of 3 young girls, the husband of an amazing wife, and the son of a devoted mother, I know without a doubt that women's health matters. We hope that the Supreme Court will agree and hold the FDA accountable for violating the law to the detriment of women's health. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to now invite to the podium Dr. Christina Francis, who is a board-certified OBGYN, has served thousands and thousands of women. She has such a compassionate heart. She spent 3 years in Kenya helping women there with OBGYN services, including delivery of children. Just an amazing woman. She's the president of the American Pro-Life Obstetrician and Gynecologist and a true expert in the field. Doctor.
Good afternoon. As Congressman Smith said, my name is Dr. Christina Francis, and I'm a board-certified OBGYN who's practiced medicine for about 2 decades now. I'm also the CEO of the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. We should all agree, regardless of one's views about abortion, that women deserve to have the ongoing care of a doctor when they're taking high-risk drugs. The FDA's inexplicable decision to remove this ongoing and in-person care for the use of abortion drugs endangers the health and safety of women and girls. And I see this regularly in my practice, as do my colleagues. That is why doctors and our medical organizations sued the FDA to hold it accountable for its reckless actions. When the FDA first approved abortion drugs, it required doctors to provide ongoing care to women using these drugs, including an initial in-person doctor visit and 2 follow-up in-person visits to check for ectopic pregnancies, which are the leading cause of maternal mortality in the first trimester, severe bleeding, and life-threatening infections. But in 2016, the FDA made sweeping changes to its original safeguards, including eliminating 2 out of the 3 previously required physician visits. Then in 2021, the FDA removed the initial in-person office visit, the only opportunity to check a woman for an ectopic pregnancy, and importantly, to give her the opportunity for individualized, informed consent. especially because an increase in the gestational age of her pregnancy directly correlates with an increase in the likelihood of a serious complication. This visit also allowed doctors to protect against coercion. But the FDA removed this critical visit even though it admitted the studies on which it relied to do so were, and I quote, not adequate to establish the drug's safety by mail. As an OBGYN, it is appalling to me that the FDA would leave women to perform their own chemical abortions at home, alone, without even one in-person visit with a doctor. What's even more shocking is that the FDA removed its safeguard despite its own label stating that roughly 1 in 25 women who take these drugs will end up in the emergency room. My colleagues and I are on the front lines, witnessing and treating the women harmed by the FDA's shameful actions. Women's health matters, and they deserve better. I hope the Supreme Court will hold the FDA accountable for its reckless disregard for women's health. Thank you.
Doctor, thank you so very much. I'd like to now invite John Mize, who's the CEO of Americans United for Life, a public interest law firm that has done amazing work over the years, but they were the ones who drafted the amicus brief that the members of the House and the Senate signed on to.
Thank you, Congressman Pfluger, Congressman Smith, Senator Hyde-Smith, and Alliance Defending Freedom for your amazing and principled support. My name is John Mize, and I'm proud to serve as the CEO of Americans United for Life, our country's first national pro-life organization. AUL has been privileged to represent 145 courageous pro-life members of Congress before the Supreme Court who are determined to hold the FDA accountable for pushing this dangerous drug on American women. This case is about the health and safety of women and girls. Usually, when confronted with the reality that it approved a dangerous drug, the FDA takes the initiative to remove the drug from the marketplace. The abortion distortion has prevented the FDA from following the normal course of withdrawing a dangerous drug, as the agency has prioritized politics and profits over safety. The arguments we presented in our amicus brief are common sense. Number one, the FDA violated the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which requires the FDA to ensure drugs are safe and efficacious. The FDA said mifepristone was safe and then proceeded to remove those safeguards. However, its claim that mifepristone is safe assumes those safeguards are in place. Number two, the FDA subverted the Pediatric Research Equity Act, which requires pediatric studies before approving or deregulating drugs. This puts underage girls at higher risk. Number three, by removing the in-person dispensing requirement, the FDA violated Comstock, which bans the mailing of chemical abortion drugs. Telemedical chemical abortions pose additional health and safety risks and raise the risk of intimate partner violence. This case exposes the impact of bad politics, money, and ideology. The Biden administration has pushed the FDA way beyond the limits of its authority. The FDA has been weaponized, and because of the abortion distortion, period. Over the last 20 years, the FDA has shredded its authority and reputation. Today, the FDA seems committed to ensuring that money keeps flowing to drug companies, Danco and GenBioPro. Common sense protections for mifepristone have been removed simply to keep profits flowing to the abortion industry and for continued political gains at the expense of the health and safety of women and girls. Americans United for Life is proud to stand with pro-life leaders from across this great nation. We remain hopeful that the court acknowledges that the FDA has failed in its duty to protect Americans, women, and families. And together, let us continue to champion the human rights of life for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now invite August Pfluger, who led the House Republicans and Democrats, we have any Democrats, sadly, in the amicus brief. August, gentleman from Texas.
Good afternoon. Next week, the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments in the case of the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine versus the FDA, which deals with the FDA's dangerous, politically motivated regulation of the abortion drug mifepristone. In advance of the arguments, I led a bicameral amicus brief with Senator Sidney Hyde-Smith and 145 lawmakers urging the court to prioritize the safety of women and girls in the upcoming ruling. This is about protecting the safety of Americans from a politicized FDA. In 2016, the FDA recklessly violated the laws by doing away with in-person and follow-up doctor visits and eliminating reporting requirements for adverse events caused by the drug. Later on in 2021, the FDA subsequently allowed mifepristone to be delivered through the mail, again disregarding the safety concerns and taking away medical oversight. We cannot allow politics to dictate healthcare decisions, especially when it comes to matters as critical as the health and safety of women. The FDA's disregard for federal law and patient safeguards is appalling, and it's unacceptable. By subverting regulations, they have exposed countless women to unnecessary risk. Together, we must hold the FDA accountable and demand that they prioritize the well-being of women over political agendas. Let us stand united in defense of life and safety, ensuring that every woman receives the care and the protection that they deserve. You know, just to really think about the fact that you can now order through the mail the drug mifepristone, not be under the care of a physician, not have those subsequent follow-on visits, not know what the negative side effects could be, especially as a father of 3 girls, is completely unacceptable. That's why we continue to fight this. I applaud the Supreme Court for what they're doing to hear this case. I want to thank my friend Chris Smith, chair of the Pro-Life Caucus, as well as Senator Sidney Hyde-Smith for her leadership. And I urge all of my colleagues to really pay attention to this, to prioritize the safety and the health of all women. Thank you very much.
Tim Burchett. Thank you, Tim.
Tim Burchett. As the 435th most powerful member of Congress, usually all the good stuff is said before I get up here. But I just wanted to know that really there's 3 things going on here. It's principle, it's politics, and it's profit. The politics of this, we got an election coming up, you know, and everybody's worried about what the polls say. They need to worry about what their conscience says. They're worried, and this is about profit. This is about a predatory industry that preys upon young girls, and they're allowing a medical procedure to occur that is at least one of the individuals that receives this medicine will die, and it could possibly lead to the death of 2. This is just a complete farce, and everybody knows what's going on with this. This White House should be ashamed, and we need to clean this up. So thank y'all.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
You've kind of already done this. Let's say I am a pro-choice Democrat. Why should I want the Supreme Court to rule in your favor?
My hope would be that anyone who has a compassion and empathy for women will want those women, all women, to be protected from this very dangerous chemical. One could be as so-called pro-choice as you could possibly be, but you at least want the women. I mean, we have always, as a movement, I've been in the movement for 50 years, believed that there are 2 victims to every abortion, the mother and the baby. Now we have a type of abortion that has been unleashed upon American women, and as was just pointed out, the pediatric rule was never followed. We don't know the deleterious effects it has on young girls. I remember we argued this during the Clinton years. We argued it and said, why aren't you testing? We don't want you to test. We don't want you to do it. But at least know what this powerful drug, the impact it might have on women who happen to be minors, young girls. So I would hope that everyone who cares about women's health will speak out and say to the Supreme Court and to Congress, because there will be follow-up here, obviously, that we care about women's health, and this is not, I mean, imagine getting this pill, as was just mentioned by my distinguished friends and colleagues, in the mail. You don't even have a doctor's visit. You can have an ectopic pregnancy and not know it, and as the doctor will tell you, and everyone will tell you in the medical profession, that is a disaster that is happening. So, for the sake of women. Yes, Doctor.
Just to add to that, you know, speaking as a physician, this issue that's before the court really is not about whether someone is pro-life, pro-choice, pro-abortion. We all should be in agreement that women, and speaking as a physician, our patients deserve better health care than this. This is egregious care that women are receiving. It has completely destroyed the opportunity for informed consent. You cannot give blanket informed consent to every pregnant woman who might think that she wants to take these drugs. It has to be individualized to her based on her gestational age, based on other risk factors, based on whether or not she has an ectopic pregnancy. And, just to share a very quick story, I sat down with a couple of my pro-choice colleagues after all of this happened and after the FDA had removed the in-person dispensing requirement. And I said, if a woman called and she thought that she was having a miscarriage, or she said that she wanted to have an abortion, but you really had no idea how far along she was, she'd never had an ultrasound to document that the pregnancy was in her uterus, would you ever give her these drugs without seeing her? And they said, no. That would be malpractice. Why on earth would anyone do that? So physicians who are in practice understand that this is about taking care of our patients. It's not about whether someone is pro-life or not pro-life. This is about ensuring that women have fully informed consent, and that when they take these drugs, they understand the risks that are facing them, and that they can trust that the FDA has said that they're safe to be dispensed in this way, that in fact they are safe to be dispensed in that way.
Bottom line, the FDA did not follow the rules in requiring this, and inform Americans about that, especially the younger Americans who are just hearing from Democrats that your grandmother had more rights than you.
Why we brought this case is because the FDA is supposed to follow the law. In particular, when Congress delegated its authority to the FDA to serve as the nation's gatekeeper for drugs and determine what drugs are safe to be in the marketplace and can remain in the marketplace, Congress gave specific instructions to the FDA of how to do that. And that's what we're holding the FDA accountable for, because the FDA recklessly disregarded those instructions to the detriment of women's health. They're supposed to have adequate studies. And then you've heard today that the FDA's own words said the studies in which they approved mail-order abortions were not adequate. That is on its face unlawful, and that's why 3 courts have already agreed with us in this case, because it's not about whether you're pro-life or pro-choice or pro-abortion. It's about women's health and what the FDA is supposed to do to uphold and protect women's health, and it's failed to do so time and time again.
You mentioned that there would be follow-up progress after the Supreme Court decision. Can you elaborate what you mean by that?
Not at this time. We're going to wait and see what happens. Get to the oral arguments next week. We will monitor it very closely.
Are there any bills that have been introduced so far that you think would be adequate?
Do you know of any bills?
My name is Jamie Dangers. I'm Legislative Director at Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith and Congressman Bob Latta have introduced a bill called the Save Moms and Babies Act that would return the original safeguards surrounding these abortion drugs and ensure that no substantially similar drug could be approved by the FDA.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
List of he's asked all of his briefs and stuff. Just looking for the list of the people who spoke. I have it. Thank you so much.